everybody. Welcome to another episode of Coaching Queens 2020. I'm Queen Bee Burrow.
And I'm Queen Bee Baumgarth. And today we have Harold Long with us. He's a pastor of my church, and we've known each other, a little over a year, almost two. Mm-hmm. Time flies when we're having fun. But anyway, what we would like to know, what our basis of our show is, what does inner peace look like for you, and how do you ascertain
it? Inner peace, that's a progressive question because it's changed as I've matured as a human being. Also, spiritually, it's changed. Inner peace for me, youngster, was rock and roll. It was girls. It was alcohol. That was the the stuff that I searched for. Whatever the streets in the world would give you was where I tried to find this peace. And temporarily, it worked. For a temporal moment, it seemed like it worked, but until it didn't anymore. And you still had to wrestle with all the junk that you've accumulated throughout your life. Much what you didn't ask for, but you got it. And so as I became a believer when I was 21, and I no longer was attempting to put worldly substances into my life to try to achieve this inner peace, there was a shift that happened. But it wasn't overnight. It was a process to get to that place. And so I struggled with that because, you've been in the world for so long that ultimately what happened is you have one foot in the world and one foot in the light and spiritual light. And you had too much world in your life to really enjoy the light, and you had too much light in your life to enjoy the world. And so you were just caught in the middle. There's a great song by Casting Crowns that really speaks to that dilemma. And so I was stuck there for a good while, for probably about 3 years as I tried to battle my way through it because of my extremely self-centered approach to life, wanting to do things my way because that's how I always did things my whole life. I want to do it my way. It's going to go the way I want, how I want. And if you don't like it, well, that's too bad for you because that's how it's going to go down. And so I lived on that self-propulsion my whole life. So with it, when you make decisions based on self, it puts you in a position to be hurt and challenged. And so I struggled a lot with that in the beginning. So when I started this journey as a believer, trying to follow a Jesus-looking God and try to mimic the life that Jesus lived, it was a challenge because if you're really going to live a faith-based life, truly live a faith-based life, not just in theory or words, but truly, it's going to cost you something. It's going to cost you a lot, actually. And so the question all of us, I think, have to face on a spiritual realm is, am I willing to pay the cost? And well, in the beginning, I was trying to have my cake and eat it too. And again, you just can't. Either you are or you aren't. You're all the way in, you sit all the way down and you stay, or you're just, you're on the fringes and eventually you'll burn out and go away. So ultimately, you have to come to an end to yourself if you're going to live a faith-based life. And so finally, I was able to do that and surrender, really, and just ask for a mentorship in my life, somebody to step into my life and speak truth, because that's the problem with most people. And that's why we struggle having peace or anything in our life, because we don't have enough truth in us. That's what the Bible is all about. That it's just that we lack truth. We live in a delusional world. We wrest satisfaction out of this world if we could only manage it well. That's the dilemma that most of us walk around with. We think we know what's going on, but we really don't. Yeah, and so we live a life of delusion. Illusion. As the great Joe Walsh sang a song called "Living a Life of Illusion," and it's very true for most of us. And so as I started this spiritual journey, I started the scales of self started to fall from my eyes, and I discovered quickly just how delusional I was. I mean, probably a third or more of my life was a fantasy, truly. I mean, all the decisions I made, people I kept at bay or pushed out of my life were, based on not fact, but just my twisted perception of who they were or what this situation was, what our relationship was. And so as I walked this journey and discovered that truth, it really set me free. And so the spiritual realm is kind of like this too. This is kind of like, this is your channel to this power, spiritual realm, the world of the spirit, heaven, God, however you want to frame it, whatever that looks like for you on your spiritual journey. But this is it. We have this conduit. Well, my conduit was, when I started this journey, it was completely filled up. You could just visualize this thing with rocks and dirt and sand and gravel. So there was no channel. I mean, the channel was completely blocked. So I didn't hear God. I didn't experience God. I didn't at all. So God sounded like this to me. And so when people would talk to me about, hey, I had this really connection with God, or the Spirit really spoke to me, or I was really moved by the Spirit, or I really felt the Spirit, it sounded like this to me. So, it led to this delusion, another delusion, that I was spiritually disqualified in some fashion, somehow, some way. I mean, this divine persecution, spiritual condemnation, however you want to frame it, that this is what I was suffering from. I broke too many hearts, burnt too many bridges in my life. So I'm just disqualified. I'm not going to have this channel. I'm not going to have this experience. But when I got under mentorship, and they explained the channel, finally, I never even knew that it existed. And we basically got the lid off the channel. We actually got the lid off this tube. And we started to dump out the junk like the resentments and the delusions and the fears and the secrets. Lord knows I had my share of secrets. I mean, just all this junk. And so all of a sudden my tube got unclogged, or started to get unclogged. And all of a sudden I started to have this spiritual experience everybody had been talking about, writing about, reading. I've been reading about, but I wasn't having. But it's impossible for anything to get through this channel until I got it cleared out. So when I got it cleared out, life today is about keeping it that way, because life's going to happen. The big pillars of life will come at you. The big pillars of life being birth, illness, if you live long enough, aging, if you live long enough, and of course the death. Those are the four big pillars that all human beings are going to face. And so we have to deal with those, not only for ourselves, but the people we love, the people in our life. And so that comes at you. And if your tube's clogged, it can be a very lonely place. There's not a whole lot of peace, is what I would say. And so peace, inner peace, is really predicated on how clear this channel is. And so I'm in control of that. I can't control what happens to me, but I control what gets in and stays. Mm-hmm. It may get in and bounce around like a pinball, but it's up to me whether I let it stay there or not. You know what I mean? And so in the Bible, they would call that being sober-minded. And sober, and when they say sober, we want to frame it in a very 21st century context and say that means being free from alcohol or mood-altering chemicals. But it means being free from anything that's going to influence your mind in a negative way, in a dark, twisted way. Yeah, so it can be news, it can be what you're watching on TV, it can be what you read. I mean, it's just the junk we put in our life. And if it pollutes us and causes us to live a really worldly life or live a life of delusion, then the Bible would say you're not sober-minded. And beware of that, because that's going to lead you astray and ultimately be your demise. So trying to live a sober-minded life is what brings me inner peace today. Knowing that I'm good with people. I don't have anybody I owe anything to in my life today. I've made restitution and reconciled with my family, and anybody that was a victim of my wrath during my run in life, that's all been long reconciled. And so I don't have to cut corners or not answer the phone or put down the blinds or cut across the street if I see certain people walking. And so
I'll keep a note of that.
But the inner peace comes from having a clean life, trying to live as clean as life as you can, but keeping your tube in the channel. So that's, for me, I mean, that's just a progression of what I'm talking about when I say it's progressive, because it's ever moving. And as I get older and I age and face other challenges in life, then I'll be tested again. But it's all going to come down to this. It's all going to be, can I keep this thing, this channel clear? Well, that's how I'd respond to that.
How there's this one story, Charity, that he tells. I don't know how this fits into it, but it just popped in my head about your friend who had presents. Do you know what I'm talking about?
One of the offenders that I work with?
Yes.
Yes. And so you want me to tell
how he achieved his inner peace? Or how?
Is that what you're asking me to do? To share
yeah, tell the story. That's I love that story.
No. So one of the things in my life that, again, this adds to the peace, so it ties directly what you're into, is the fact that if you're going to live a really fruitful life, to be happy, joyous, and free, then you're going to have to live an other-centered life. Your life's going to have to be on somebody else other than yourself. So as Jesus would say, love God, love your neighbor, change the world. That's the calling on our life. And so the question is, not in theory, because in theory, almost every human being would say, well, I love all people. I'm not a racist. I'm not for injustice. I mean, they would just blab that stuff out in a heartbeat. But your life proves what you're about. Who you're around and what you're engaged in proves everything. It's the fruits of your life. So again, if you're going to live a other-centered life, it's going to cost you something. And so for me, it led me into ministry, of course, but it also led me going places that I didn't want to end up, to love my neighbor, to love people that are down and out, oppressed in some fashion or another, and needed somebody to step in their life and walk shoulder to shoulder with them and help them rediscover life. And for me, that started in the Skid Row missions here in St. Louis on Washington Street at Harbor Light, and a place I went every Thursday night and Saturday morning for about 3 years, dealing with homeless, mainly African-American men for the most part, not all, but mostly, and just broken people. And so it challenged me in every way, with every ism, every phobia that could exist. Probably, it came to the surface. And mentorship, you got to work it out there. It isn't something you're going to go home and journal about. That's not an exercise that you don't need to do, but you need to work it out there with those people. If the conflict is there, then work it out. And so I was able to do that over the course of 3+ years. Then I got an invitation to go into penitentiary system, mainly maximum security facilities, and I still do that today. And that's been doing that for almost 27 years now. But when you deal in a maximum security facility, you really get to walk shoulder to shoulder with people, because people are, you're with them for a long time, spend years with people. The challenge of that is that you spend all that time with them, but as their custody level drops, they're going to get transferred to another facility. And so you lose track of them for a few years before they actually, if you're fortunate enough to reconnect on the streets at some point in life. But I've had the privilege to connect with many and mentor several. And one of the gentlemen that Joan was referring to was a gentleman named Brent. And Brent came to prison in 1987. He was a kid that lived here in Missouri, grew up by himself, single kid, grew up in Lebanon, Missouri. And, he was raised by a dad that was just not a guy that was affectionate, not a guy that demanded a lot, abusive in a lot of ways, mentally, emotionally, probably a little bit physically to him and his mom. And the kid could never do anything right his entire life. Nothing was ever good enough. And so that got in his tube, and it started to become a resentment at a young age. And it just festered and festered and festered after he went to college and graduated college and came back home one weekend, had a great job, doing well on his own, came home, and his dad invited him to paint the garage, or paint the barn. He gave him 5 gallons of paint, asked him to do it. And his dad ran off to do something else. And so he took on the task, but he got it done in 4 gallons instead of 5. And his dad came home and the first thing he asked is, how come there's a gallon of paint left? He says, well, I got it done in 4. Looks great. You can take that back and get your money back. And no, I told you to use 5. I expect you to use 5. Well, this is just years, of this resentment finally came to a head, and this altercation took place. And unfortunately, he took his father's life that day. That's ultimately what happened. So he got sentenced to 2 life sentences, 2nd-degree murder and armed criminal action. And so he came into prison in 1987, bitter, full of rage, and full of all this junk, full of his tube completely clogged, and full of all the isms and junk that he carried in life and his addictions and whatever. And so he continued to try to live that life on the inside for about 10 years. But in 96, he was invited to come to one of the groups that I was a part of. And I met him. And offenders come into the groups, all the groups, the same way. They come in with their arms crossed. And why do they do that? Because they listen with their eyes and they think with their feelings. And it's really important to get that. They listen with their eyes and they think with their feelings. So they're going to watch you. That's how they listen. They watch. They watch to see if you're authentic, if you're who you are, can they trust you? And it takes about 6 months. But after about 6 months, he started to open up a little bit. And we had a separate workshops and things we were doing to help mentor these guys on a spiritual path. And he got in one of those, and I watched the same spiritual exercises that I apply in my life that changed my life, change his. And when he started in that program in 96, his mother would no longer come and see him. His grandmother no longer came to see him. His wife was already separated from him. So he was all alone. There was nobody else in his life. And as he started this journey, and his attitude and his outlook on life started to change, and God started to change his heart, he started to change. And his mom was the first one to notice it in their phone calls, and she got back on this visiting list. And then eventually his grandmother came, and eventually his wife heard about it through his mom and his grandma, and she came back and ultimately, redid her vows with him. And so he spent a number of years after that. But yeah, I'd watch him go up for parole and get a 2-year setback or a 5-year setback. But ultimately, in 2006, he came in and to their group, and he had a big smile that wrapped around his head, and he was totally ecstatic. And he said, you're never going to guess what happened. And I said, I come here every week with holy anticipation, knowing that God's at work and something cool will happen. And he says, well, I got an out date, which was a huge revelation because, typically in Missouri, you're going to do on 2 life sentences, you'll easily do 30 years. But he did 21 years to the date. So in 2006, he announced that he had an out date for 2008. And he got transferred, of course, but he got transferred within the same prison system that I was in. So I was able to stay with him the whole time. But I told him in 2008, I said, when you leave, I said, the key to this mentorship thing is you're going to have to call me every day until I tell you not to. Until we decide, I should say, not me telling him, but we decide that it's not necessary for you to call me every day. What I will tell you in a short story is that he still calls me every day. And I talk to him every day, all these years. But he left and he got out of prison. His wife picked him up and he called me that night on the way home from prison. And he said, hey, man, I'm out. I'm in the car. I'm on this thing called a cell phone. And I started laughing. I said, yeah, I'm pretty familiar with them. That's what you're calling me on. Right now, I've got a cell phone. And we laughed about that. But he said, I said, just go home, enjoy your family, and call me in the morning. Because he had 2 daughters that were little when he went to prison. So now they're grown up now. So everybody was there to welcome him home. And so the next day he called me and about 9:30 in the morning, and he was really emotional. I could feel the joy in his heart. I could tell he was excited, but he was very, very emotional. I said, what's going on? He goes, man, you're never going to believe what I've been doing all morning. And I said, being who I am, I'm being silly. I said, well, you haven't been with your wife for 21 years. I can imagine what you've been doing. And of course, he busted out laughing. And he said, no, I'm not talking about that. And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, man, I've been opening gifts all morning. And I said, gifts? And I said, what, like welcome home gifts? He goes, no, man. I've been opening Father's Day gifts, birthday gifts, and Christmas gifts since 1996. And I said, wow, that's, it just felt in my heart like butter. I mean, just tears just come down my face. And he kind of giggled and he says, you'll never guess what I got for Christmas in 97. And I said, what did you get for 97? He said, I got a Miami's Dolphin jacket. And I said, a Miami's Dolphin jacket. Now, he's never been to an NFL game in his life, so I don't know why he liked the Miami Dolphins, but he did. He was infatuated with it. But this is how God works, because somebody who knew Brent, one of the other volunteers, had already given me 4 tickets for him to go see the Rams and the Dolphins play here in St. Louis, and the Rams 4 weeks after that. So I said, well, I got 4 tickets to give you. Go to this game. He couldn't believe it. He goes, well, who am I going to take? I said, well, you take whoever you want. And he says, well, will you go? And I said, well, absolutely, I'll go. He says, well, you go, I'll go, and we'll get Bob. And Bob was a guy who did life in 45. And we'll get Gary, who had life in 20. So all 3 of these lifers were all guys that came through our program in 96, all had the transformation that I had personally and had the same transformation. So we were all out we went and ate pancakes at Chris's Pancake House and went to the ball game and had the time of our life. And at halftime, we were cutting up and laughing so hard. The lady in front of us turned around at halftime and she says, excuse me. She goes, I just wanted to say that you guys are having an awful lot of fun. I said, yeah, we are. And she goes, I've been watching you guys. You guys don't even drink. I said, no, ma'am, we don't drink. She goes, well, it's a good thing. And I said, why is that? She goes, because the way you guys are carrying on, you guys would probably end up in prison or something. And we all started. She hadn't, I know who she was talking to, but restorations happen, and he had to face all the challenges somebody coming out of prison faced. But today he's a general manager of a big dealership over in Illinois, and it's a very successful life. His wife has since passed. His mom's passed. His grandma's passed. His 2 daughters are still alive. But he's very much, been transformed and living a pretty amazing life. So yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, there you go.
That's funny you say 6 months. I have a youth group. We just hit the 6-month mark, and these kids are having these transformations where they're starting to take personal responsibility for a lot more things. Like they're realizing that what they allow into their life is what comes back through them, and they just want to give people love. And they're deciding what is toxic, and they're finding out that they are more toxic to themselves than anyone else. And they realize that in that toxicity, they had been putting that out and making other people's lives toxic. This was just been a mind-blowingly huge week. And to see teenagers come to that realization, because that is kind of my drive, is to share what I know about peace, my experiences, but I know that the kids and stuff, a lot of people, we have to go through what we're going to go through. in order to come to that soul deep realization that there's something bigger out there. And like you, my tube was full. That sucker was full 15 years ago. I had a wad of Band-Aids on top of everything about this big, trying to cover it all up. You know, if I can't see it, it's not there. Band-Aids are gross. So I had to rip them all off. And, you know, you got to hit that proverbial rock bottom. And I really want to help kids avoid or not hit quite as hard as the rest of us have. And maybe catch that a little sooner and start shifting that. And a lot of them have really stepped out. And when you said 6 months, I got these chills. I got the goosies all the way up, and they were warm and fuzzy. And all I heard in my head was, see, you're on the right path. 6 months. You're doing great. You've already had that. So thank you for that. First off, you're the messenger today. I appreciate that tremendously. But that story is incredible. And
he has one about a golf club too, but I know.
Is anything like your fork story?
You never know where the conversation's going to go. How long is the golf club one? That was a good one that he said in church one day.
Well, I don't even.
Did I give away the punchline?
I don't even know what I gave away. I don't even know that story, you know, necessarily. Is that it's totally centered around a golf club. But there's lots of stories. I mean, you know, speaking of youth and looking at youth like you're talking about, I mean, you look at this movement that's going on in the world with the youth and millennials. Not that it's not always been there, but it's really, you really saw it in a broad spectrum with the Bernie Sanders crowd, and and not just not just in the context of Bernie Sanders or that ideology, but the point of it being is that these kids want to stand for something. Kids want to do something. They want to be involved in something that's going to make a difference. They don't want to just. You know, that's why you have such a mass exodus of youth in church, because when they walk in, it's like walking into the past.
Mm-hmm.
It's redundant stuff, and it's like, but we're not doing anything. There's nothing going on here. We're not really making a difference. Maybe individually we're out doing some things and volunteering and whatever we're doing, but as a collective group of people, we're not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
But if you create something out in the community, whatever it is, you know, it's amazing how the youth will sign up for that and want to be a part of that, because they want something tangible that they can say, you know, look, I'm a part of something. I did something. And so I think if we're smart as religious leaders, but also just even secular leaders, that we have to create space for them to be able to shine and thrive through the gifts that God's given them.
Yes.
And there's nothing more powerful than being engaged. I mean, you can talk all you want and teach all you want, but when you actually get out there and there's skin on skin and there's sweat equity put into it, it's a game changer for so many people. So, you know, so youth is powerful.
She's doing a great job. She's doing, I mean.
Well, there's those days, man. I'm like,
yeah.
But that's just because I've been there. I know, you know, in my experience, I'm like, oh, that's not going to end well for you. And I have to let them learn their lesson in the way they're going to learn their lesson, you know. And surprisingly, the kids really are very spiritual, very spiritual. They just, like you said, one of them said to me, they're like, was it Albert Einstein that said, if we do things the way we've always done, expecting a different result, isn't that the definition of insanity? So why aren't we shifting and trying new things? You know, and they truly believe people can change. And so do I, because I've seen it. I've changed. Some people choose not to change. And we punish those who have changed, especially in the prison system. That kind of environment, I can't even imagine the impact that would have to shift a person to that point of, I got to surrender. I got to surrender all the way if I want my life to get better, if I want to rectify what I did. And I truly believe for a lot of people, it does help them. It's a messed up way that we even have to go to that point. But I believe that people can actually change. And you get this, I don't know if you guys see it a whole lot, that crowd of, this person's a narcissist because they said this to my face. And I'm like, maybe they're having a bad day. You know, you don't know their story. You don't know what they're up against and what they're fighting and their demons. And we hide so much from the world. And I believe anyone truly can change. But like you said, they got to be willing to dump that tube out and clear that channel wide open.
Well,
And then once it's open, and then you're like, oh,
Yeah.
probably should go say I'm sorry. Crap.
but the problem is that they'll need help doing that.
Yes.
It's something they're going to have a revelation on their own about, because the typical response from human beings is that to conclude that others is wrong is about as far as we ever got. So we get stuck in the pattern of delusions. I do a whole workshop called the 5 Big Delusions, especially around alcoholism and addiction. But in the delusion, number one is I'm not what you say that I am. I'm not what all the evidence says I am. And so we in the world we toss around this phrase denial, but it's really a poor definition of what goes on with most people, because it's not denial. Denial means I know the truth about myself and I'm lying about it. But most people are living a life of delusion, which is way past denial, meaning I can't see myself for what I really am, and I can't differentiate the true from the false. So I'm not what you say that I am. I'm not what all the evidence says that I am. And so that delusion is what drives some people out to the point that they'll return, as the song would say, they'll return. And so overcoming that delusion, number one, and taking ownership on the problem is absolutely huge. Anything
That's when I hit at 40.
Yeah. So any habit or hang up you have, when you can hit that ownership and just put passing the buck and say, okay, this is it. Because like my mentor told me at the age of 25, he said, Harold, every single thing you got in your life right now, sitting at my kitchen table, you've attracted to you by the person that you become. And the day you're man enough to own that is on the day you're on your way to change. But until you can own that, this vicious cycle you're on, you're going to go back to the streets and you're going to burn your life into the ground, or you're going to do what my dad did. And unfortunately, my dad took his life. That's how my dad, the pain of life was too hard. My dad just took his life. So, but you're going to do one or two things. You're either going to grow or you're going to go. And the $1 million question is, what do you want to do? And I knew he was going to offer a spiritual solution, but the challenge in any kind of spiritual circle, doesn't matter if it's in recovery circles or it's in church circles or it's whatever, Hinduism, it doesn't matter. It's you have to take actions that I can promise you don't believe in. You don't believe that they're really going to change my life. They may change your life, but you don't understand my life. They're not going to change my life. I've burned too many bridges, broke too many hearts. The mountain's too high. Too much time's passed me by. And that delusion is powerful, because the 5 big delusion, number one, I'm not what you say that I am. Number two is I am what you say I am, but it's not my fault. It's victimization. And the problem with victimization is you can drink yourself to death and it's not your fault. You can blow your lungs out, you can blow your veins out, you can blow your brains out, you can blow a lot of things out, and it's not your fault. You can sit in a 9x7 or 10x6 jail cell for the rest of your life, and it's not your fault. That's the problem with victimization. It puts its hand right around your throat and squeezes the life out of you. And to be liberated, to finally toss that victim card, we're going to need a lot of help. We're going to need people walking shoulder to shoulder with us in our life to get to that place. But even once you get to that place, you get to what I just talked about, and that's you get to the place where you can come in and say, well, okay, I'll take ownership for my life, and I'm not blaming anybody anymore. I'll take full responsibility for my life. But let's just be real, man. My life's over with. I've burnt too many bridges. I'm too old. The mountain's too high. It's the delusion of impossibility. And when you really get there, then what happens is you get discouragement in your heart. When you get discouragement in your heart, that's when you quit. That's why you have 60-70% recidivism rates in the United States in prison systems, because people are already quit before they ever got out. They never even got started. And so I tell guys all the time inside the institution, if you're not willing to start the process here, don't fall under the spell that you're going to somehow another do it when you walk out of here, because you're not. If you're not willing to do it right here, right now, you're not going to do it when you leave. So it starts now. And then that fourth delusion is the delusion of spiritual disqualification, which I've already talked about, that you're separated from God and there's no way you're ever going to be connected. And then the last delusion is that there's no real purpose for my life. So you take somebody like Brent, who's coming out of the prison system, who's got felonies, and some of them don't have an education. They don't have any relationship. They don't have a solid home plan. They don't have a healthy family to go to. They give them a bus pass and maybe a few bucks and a bag of clothes, and there you go make it happen. And so you end up on the streets and with that, and you can't go any further. You feel you're already defeated in your mind. So what's the purpose of all this? I do all this work. You want me to do all this stuff for what? I'm going to wash dishes and I'm going to take a bus for the rest of my life. I'm going to live in an official apartment at best, or I'm going to end up on the streets. So why even try? And those delusions are powerful. And we got to have somebody walk shoulder to shoulder with us to overcome those things. And that's where I think, there's opportunity for people that have had victory in their life to be able to go into places you don't want to end up. Places like halfway houses and prisons and shelters and going down the line. There's so many opportunities to step into people's life and walk shoulder to shoulder with them and help them rediscover life. And I think if you do that long enough, you're going to finally understand what Jesus means by love your neighbor as yourself. You're going to finally get that. And it's 18 inches from your head to your heart. When that shift happens in your life, then you'll understand what it means to give yourself. And you won't want to live any other way. I can promise you, it will change you that much. So it's a powerful shift, but you have to do it long enough to experience it.
Harold, I love you. I do. I thank you for being here. I really do.
This is awesome.
I appreciate it. I'll tell you what, stay right there, guys. We'll be right back.
A better way to hold your phone. Introducing Steady Straps. Made here in the USA, Steady Straps are high-quality, flexible straps that adjust to hold virtually any phone comfortably and securely. Steady Straps are washable and come in a wide range of colors and styles. See them all at SteadyStraps.com. Because they're so visible, they're the perfect promotional item to advertise your company message or logo. Learn more at SteadyStraps.com. That's SteadyStraps.com.
Hey, everybody, we're back. Harold
Awesome.
is amazing. On our break, I was telling Joan that I had posed several questions, just in my meditation and sitting last night, am I in the right place? Am I moving forward in the right direction? I always try to reground myself and make sure the choices I'm making are in alignment in what feel good from my heart, to make sure that I'm not being toxic to myself, the people around me. There's a lot of self-reflection that goes on in my life. And I had posed these questions and I'm like, okay, I surrender to the fact that I will just get the answers. And this morning they showed up as Harold, all of it. And it's so incredible to sit and listen to someone share their story and how they have gotten to inner peace and how they use that to live a life that is in alignment with who they are. And you get those goosies.
He lives it. He walks the walk, man.
Yeah.
He really does. And
so incredible.
I love that Brent story.
Oh, that is such a beautiful story. It's super cool too to hear that. I always believe people can change. People tell me I'm naive all the time, but I'm sorry. People, you can choose to change. You can choose to take a different path in life, like Harold said. But it takes that moment of, oh man, I did this crap. But you did
work on it now, not later. It has to be now. It's present.
And you're always doing the best you can in the moment with what you have. So self-deprecating, beating yourself up, we all fall in those cycles. It's part of human. It's how we learn. And I believe that everybody can, if they want to, truly change. I don't care what you got going on. If you're tired of it, you will hit that point and you'll be like,
and
I don't want to do
this. When I was 40, but that's another show that we and stuff like that. But we are running really close to time again. We almost like least, but hey,
sometimes it's the message that comes through, and that's what we are here to do, is share it. And I really hope Harold comes back and joins us again.
I'm sure he will. We have Dan Goodwin coming up on the 22nd. John Largent is on the 29th, and I'm slowly trying nonchalantly, to where you guys don't look and see me do this. We have Larry Walters, who is the inventor of
This is so cool, guys. Seriously, I don't karate chop my own face anymore at night.
No kidding.
It's awesome. I love it.
So anyway, we won't keep up. We won't take up any more of your time. We enjoy having you guys here. Hope you enjoyed it. We love Harold. And I just want to say, may the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. Bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye, guys.